Howdy folks, hope you're all having a good one. Welcome to the Salt Mines Q&A Discord Q&A for February. And if you're watching this on Monday, welcome to another episode of Mingles with Jingles. I'm sure you all know the routine by now. You ask the questions, I answer them, wander off topic, and end up babbling about something completely inconsequential for half an hour. I've had a quick look at some of the questions. There's some good ones here. There's a lot of Navy questions there, so as somebody was saying earlier, we'll probably get 3 questions asked. I will just wander off topic, spinning Navy stories, but that's not necessarily a bad thing, is it? So we're going to crack on with the first question, which is not Navy related. And I've got a very, very short answer to this one. This is from Basement Jesus. He says, Dear Jingles, I have recently fallen down the rabbit hole of SCP, Secure, Contain, Protect, after discovering a good law person on YouTube, and I'm curious if you ever have. If you have, which SCP is your favourite, and if you've not fallen down the rabbit hole, why not? I have not fallen down the rabbit hole because this is the first I've ever heard of it. And while we were waiting to start this Q&A, I did take a quick look on Google, and it looks really interesting. It's apparently it started on 4chan, so you know you're in trouble straight away. And it's a sort of fictional universe where the SCP Foundation is this paranormal, military, and scientific. It's all completely fictional, and they're all about. I don't know if you ever played The Secret World MMO, where all of this mystical, fantastical creatures and stuff are real, and you've got these various different secret societies tasked with investigating all of these paranormal events. It's kind of like that, but instead of there being a game based around it, it's all done online. It looks fascinating. So if I do disappear for a couple of weeks, Basement Jesus, you're responsible. I'm going to have to look into this. But this is SCP, Secure, Contain, Protect. Just give it a quick Google. It might be something that you're interested in. Moving on to the second question. This is from Tank50US. Dear Grand Gnome Admiral, have you started watching Masters of the Air? And what are your thoughts of the B-17s and their crews? He has a note here. Episode 3 is incredibly rough since it deals with the Schweinhurt-Regensburg raid, a really messed up mission with an almost 50% casualty rate. The history of that raid, is an interesting subject and shows the absolute desperation for a ball turret gunner that's trapped with their bombers breaking apart around them and the crew are forced to leave them behind. So no, I have not started watching Masters of the Air. Not because I don't want to watch it, I really do want to watch it, but because it's only available on Apple, and I am not giving money to Satan. So no, I'm not going to get an Apple TV subscription. I don't care if they've got Masters of the Air. I don't care if they've got the Foundation series, which I was really excited about because I was a big fan of the Isaac Asimov books. And then realised it was only available on Apple, so no. Because Satan is not getting a penny out of my pocket. I am not getting an Apple TV subscription. So I'm not saying I'm not going to watch Masters of the Air, but Apple aren't going to get paid for it. Just put it that way. Now, B-17s and their crews. Funnily enough, I don't know if you recall back in the possibly, it would have been early 90s, Micro Pros did the B-17 Flying Fortress game, and they're redoing it. It's actually in alpha at the moment, and that was an incredible game where you would actually have to attend your briefing. So basically, just like a real B-17 bomber crew experience, you'd have to attend the flight briefing, get in the aircraft, take off, navigate to the target. So you'd have to play the role of the navigator, navigate to the target. Waist and turret gunners, when you come under air attack, fly through the flak, switch to the bombardier's position, take control of the aircraft, use the northern bomb site, line up on the target, drop the bombs, and then get back to base, taking care of whatever damage you've sustained on the way, and successfully land. They did the whole thing, and a big old campaign, and that's coming out soon, and I'm really looking forward to that. And it really is probably the closest. I mean, I'm not trying to say it's the same as actually being a B-17 bomber crew, because that was not fun. In particular, as Tank says, the Schweinhurt-Regensburg raid, a 50% casualty rate. Absolutely horrific. Your chances of getting back from a full tour of duty were not good. But that game is probably the closest experience you can have to what it would have actually been like from the safety and comfort of your own desktop. So very much looking forward to that. And I would love to watch Masters of the Air, but I'm not giving money to Apple, so I'll just have to wait for an alternative method of watching it. And I'm sure we all know what that means. Moving on to the next question. This is from Cheap Milk. Jingles, have you played SnowRunner? I haven't. It's always been one of those games that I've been tempted to get, but I've always had other stuff to do. He says, I won't lie, at first I thought it would be super boring, especially since I'm not particularly into trucks, but after quite a few hours I can confidently say that you might want to check it out. Plenty of opportunities to extend the Jingles landings to Jingles parkings, usually on the side of the vehicle or upside down. So if you don't know what SnowRunner is, it's a truck driving game, but it's an off-road truck driving game. Usually lots of big Russian trucks driving through Siberia in all kinds of awful weather, trying to make it from one point to the next without flipping the truck over. It does look like fun. It's one of those games that you know you're going to love it, you're going to hate. You're either going to find it incredibly boring or you're just going to absolutely love it. And as somebody who doesn't actually drive, I do actually kind of like driving games. It's a sort of, oh, so this is what it's like kind of thing. Not that I'm particularly good at it, as anybody's ever seen me driving around Night City and Cyberpunk will attest. But yeah, and I believe SnowRunner is almost always on sale on Steam, so it's not one of those expensive games. It's been out for a while. Oh, next question from Faceisle. Oh, this is a good one. Dear Almighty Overlord Jingles, I thought he was talking about. I thought he'd misspelled, and he was talking about books, but no, he's actually talking about boots. He says, as someone who's been getting into boots, both military and otherwise, what would be your recommendation for the best and/or most comfortable boot or boots that you ever worn or recommended, or would recommend? If you're not interested in durability and you just want something that's tough and comfortable, High Tech used to do a rubber-soled combat boot. They probably still do them. That are pretty cheap, extremely comfortable, waterproof, and depending on how much you use them, will probably last you a good at least 6 months before they start falling apart. But the best set of boots I ever had were British Army Pro boots. They've got a reinforced steel sole. There's a rubber sole with a steel plate in it to protect your feet from standing on anything nasty. They're waterproof. They've got a steel toe cap. They're comfortable as anything, and they're ridiculously expensive and very hard to get a hold of. I, however, managed to get a pair for free when I was on HMS Newcastle. The only people on board that would get, you get issued boots when you join the Navy, but they're cheap crap. You've got your DMS boots, direct molded sole. Those are your working boots that you wear all the time, but you get issued a pair of combat boots, and they're rubber soled and they're cheap rubbish, and the second they get wet they rot and fall apart. But the air crew got British Army Pro boots, and they had a very limited supply of them on board. But because I was in the supply department, I managed to get one of the leading stores accountants to obtain a pair for me when I did a favour for him. They're just amazing. They last for years, and they are so incredibly comfortable. British Army Pro boots. They're lined with Gore-Tex. They're waterproof. They're warm. They're comfortable, and they're just tough as old boots. Next question comes from Yamatog2. During the time in the Navy, how often did you find yourself in the more technical rooms, engine rooms, gun turrets, ammo storage, etc., or on the bridge? Well, I was on the bridge quite a bit. Because when I first joined the Navy, I was a radio operator, and you've got somebody on the bridge manning the tactical voice channel, and also because signalling lanterns and all that sort of shit, whenever you were doing flashing light, because it's the most secure form of communication available. Morse code by flashing light signals, because the only person that can intercept it would have to be in direct line of sight between you and whoever you're signalling. So it's only visual range, obviously, but it's completely secure. So you can do all kinds of stuff with, but you need to know Morse code, of course. But as a radio operator, I did. So yeah, I would have to take watches on the bridge, basically every 2 or 3 days. I'm up there. The other technical compartments, like the engine rooms, the auxiliary machinery rooms, the turrets, the ammo storage, everybody on board has to know. Basically, everybody on board, because you can't call a fire brigade. If there's a fire on board and you're in the middle of the Atlantic, you have to deal with it yourself. So everybody on board is a trained firefighter. And different branches specialise in different parts of firefighting. So, for example, the support party, the guys in the fireproof suits with the breathing apparatus and all that big stuff, they're usually the chefs. And various different other branches get assigned to various different other jobs. But there could be a fire in any compartment on board, and you have to be familiar with all of those compartments. So every day's duty watch when you're alongside in harbour, you would either have a fire exercise or you'd have a fire briefing. And the fire briefing would be, for example, to take everybody into the forward machinery room and show you, because otherwise, in the normal circumstances, you would never go down there because only the marine engineers would be down there. So all of the stewards and the chefs and the radar plotters, they would never have any reason to go down the engine spaces. But when you were on duty and a member of the fire party, they would take you down there and show it to you, because you might have to go down there and fight a fire. So you would get a thorough briefing on like where all the firefighting appliances are, where the escape exits are, what hazards are down there. There's a lot of hazards in an engine room, trust me. And all of that sort of thing. So you did get thoroughly briefed on the ins and outs of all of the different compartments on the ship, even if during the normal course of your duties you would never go down there. Places like the communications office, when I was a radio operator, it's a classified compartment, so you're not allowed in there unless you have permission, because you've got all this secret stuff. And I remember one day we had the fire party coming into the MCO, the main communications office, and we had to put covers up over all of the secret shit in order to show them around. Like, for example, all of the racks, all of the communications racks, they've got this sort of plug. So you take because you can't go, well, you can spray foam or water on communication systems, but they won't like it. You'll do more damage than the fire would. So what they've got in the front of each of the big radio racks, there's a plug. It's marked in red, and it just says insert firefighting device here. So you get a CO2 fire extinguisher, and there's normally a sort of bell, like a blunderbuss muzzle on the end of it, that you spray the CO2 on the source of the fire, but it twists off, and then you've got like a spike bayonet attachment, and you basically stick this into the plug and then discharge the fire, the CO2, and it floods the inside of the equipment rack with CO2 to put the fire out without destroying the whole thing by spraying water all over it. So we'd show people stuff like that. But if you're on board a good ship, they would do firefighting briefings for the duty watch every day and take you around compartments that you would normally never get access to. It's all really interesting stuff. So yeah, great question, thank you. Next one from Bearcat Racing. Oh God, this one. I had a quick peek at this question before I started recording, and I thought, how the hell am I going to answer this? So, Bearcat Racing. G'day, Jingles. 22nd of last month was Bearcat's 16th birthday. Bearcat is Bearcat Racing's cat, by the way, 16 years old, a ripe old age. Rumour has it that he will meow and claw at the screen for all of us to see as a birthday present. Don't believe your rumours. I ain't doing it. He wants me to insert this in here as a video. Maybe we'll do this later. Also, the air is now 6057. You have been defrosted and have emerged from your hiding spot behind the 7th planet in our solar system. Your time has come to reign over Earth. You have to introduce a new religion with yourself as leader. What 2 rules will you introduce, and what megalithic monument will you leave Earth to honour you, and where would you like it erected? Erect. His words. Thanks. Okay. This is something that you really, really do need to think about to do justice to it. And I will have a good think about this. I haven't had time to think about a good answer for this one here and now, but I will have a good think about this and leave it as a pinned comment. However, do feel free to make your own suggestions in the comments, because I can see there being some good ones in response to this. So thank you for the question, Bearcat, but I really need to do this one justice, so I'm going to take some time to think about that. But everybody else, have a good think about it. Leave your suggestions in the comments. Next question from Ethereal. Hello, Jingles. Are you considering crossing the Channel to Normandy in June for the 80th anniversary of the D-Day landings? Greetings from France. This is something I've always wanted to do on the anniversary of D-Day every year, but I'm just never really got around to it. However, I'm having to think about this, and my friend Roy lives up in Birmingham. Roy was the guy that I did the Hell's Highway trip with, following the route of 3rd Armoured Corps for Operation Market Garden through the Netherlands. And we're always looking for stuff to do. Like every year we go on a road trip, and honestly this sounds like the perfect opportunity to finally get off our asses and go and see Normandy. So yes, I am considering crossing the Channel to Normandy for the 8th anniversary of the D-Day landings, because it sounds like the perfect thing for me and Roy to do for a road trip this year. And it's been a couple of years since we did one, so it's high time we did another one. Captain Fluffy Butt. Sorry. Captain Fluffy Butt. Sorry. Akazuki's nickname is actually Princess Fluffy Butthole, so I get where he's coming from. He says, did you ever consider joining the Merchant Marine? I didn't. Although my stepfather was in the Merchant Navy. I can't remember what job he did. It was some engineering job. He was an engineer's mate or something like that. And I have worked with, well, not technically the Merchant Navy, but technically, yes, the Merchant Navy, the Royal Fleet Auxiliary. They are technically civilians, and they man things like our tankers and supply ships and stuff. I mean, it's bizarre because they are not technically in the military, although their officers are. And they put themselves in harm's way just as much as other members of the actual Navy do. Because you can't operate a fleet deployed without fuel and stores. And so they have to basically sail with us and supply the fuel and the stores. And they're not in the military, so they do an amazing job. How can I put this delicately? We were, I can't remember what, I think it might have been on the Newcastle as well. We were doing a South Atlantic deployment. There used to be, because we used to have ships, now we don't, what was called FIGS, Falkland Island Guard Ship. And that used to be a single deployment down to the Falklands. You'd be down there for 6 months, guarding the Falklands. And you didn't need a fleet auxiliary ship with you, because anytime you needed fuel, you just head down to Port Stanley or Mare Harbour, well, not Port Stanley, that's a civilian port. You'd head down to Mare Harbour, the military port, not far from the airbase there, and you would fuel and take on stores there. But then we started getting rid of ships and not replacing them with enough other ships, so they decided they would combine Falkland Islands Guard ship with the South Atlantic Patrol. So one ship doing everything. And then later on, we had even less ships. So they said, well, we'll just have an Atlantic patrol ship. One ship covering the entire Atlantic, north and south, because, yeah, nothing's ever going to go wrong there. And when that happened, that ship would need an auxiliary, an oiler, to provide fuel for it when it was on patrol. So we had the RFA Grey Rover, which was a... Oh, I don't know if you can hear Akazuki crying in the background, demanding attention. She's just woken up, so yes. What is it, Akazuki? You probably can't actually hear her because I've got a directional microphone, but trust me, I can hear her. She's being very demanding. I think she wants feeding. You've just been fed, you greedy cow. Anyway, what was I talking about? Oh yeah, the RFA Grey Rover. It was affectionately known as the... I can't say this with a straight face. To the crew of HMS Newcastle, our fleet auxiliary ship that was deployed with us when we were on South Atlantic Patrol, the Grey Rover, was affectionately known as the Brown Rover because of the... I need to be really careful how I say this. We called it the Brown Rover because of the high percentage of homosexuals who were members of its crew. It was... If you can't take a joke, you shouldn't join the Navy. They were a great bunch. Anytime we were on a ship, we were on a visit somewhere, spend a couple of days in port, you know, they would come over and have drinks with us, and we would go over and have drinks with them, all kinds of parties. But they thought it was hilarious that we called them the Brown Rover. You know, they had a really good sense of humour about it. But yeah, they were a good bunch. But that's the closest I've ever come to working with a merchant marine. I've certainly never served in the merchant marine, and I never considered it. I mean, the reason I joined the Navy in the first place was, one, to get away from home, because I hated, you know, teenager, hated being at home, and two, you know, why not the Air Force? Why not the Army? Well, I did actually want to join the military, so that ruled out the Air Force, and I didn't like the idea of sleeping in ditches, so that ruled out the Army, and also the Navy were advertising, specifically for radio operators. Now, I didn't put two and two together because I was young and stupid and questioned what's so bad about being a radio operator that radio operators are quitting and they actually have to advertise specifically for them, because I was young and stupid. So I joined up as a radio operator, immediately regretted it. I mean, it wasn't that bad a job, but I was just really bad at it. And after the first 4 years, I branch transferred to writer and Loved every minute of it. But never the Merchant Marine, sorry. Next question from Sir Blake. I'm doing pretty well for the questions today. I'm blasting through them. I'm not getting too sidetracked. Old Navy story. Oh, I remember this. Remember the Harpoon game? I do. Made by 360 Pacific. You played it in the 90s on HMS Coventry, according to Mingles with Jingles episode 202. One of the petty officer radar plotters walked past and noticed how the game had top secret info on the game. Yeah. So when I was on HMS Coventry, this was before I had a PC. I had a Commodore Amiga 500, and later a Commodore Amiga 1200, and then eventually I got a PC so I could play the LucasArts X-Wing game. But that's a completely different story. So having a, and remember this is in the 90s, so there were no flat screen monitors or anything. They were all big fat ass cathode ray tube, basically television monitors. So you needed some space. You needed a desk. You needed space to have the computer, the keyboard, the monitor, and it needed to be reasonably private and secure. And that presented some problems because as a radio operator, I lived in a mess deck with 14 other radio operators. It was tiny. There was no space in there for me to set up a computer. And I couldn't set it up in the communications office because, it's a classified compartment. So the trick was making yourself useful to somebody who did have an office that you could set the computer up in. So I got in with the chief stoker, chief marine engineering mechanic, because his job was fuel logistics. So he had to do logistics reports, send his lads around every day, taking measurings of the fuel tanks and all that sort of stuff, so that we knew how much fuel we had, how much endurance the ship had, and when we were going to need to refuel. He had other jobs, but that was one of them. And I would basically, because I had various different spreadsheets and stuff installed on the computer, he would use my computer, and his lads could, in the chief stoker's office, could use my computer to do the fuel reports and print them out. Which saved them a lot of time because they didn't have to bother getting in line in the tech office in order to get the work done there. So they could do it in the privacy and security of the chief stoker's office, and outside of working hours, I would use the office to play games on the computer. One of those games was Harpoon, and as Sir Blake says, it was this really, really good game in the 90s where you would control the fleet. And I'm not really sure where they got all their information from. A lot of it was probably from the Jane shipping guides, but some of this stuff was remarkably accurate. So I'm sitting there in the office, the door's open, and I'm playing Harpoon, and I'm managing this fleet against attack from Russian missile cruisers and so on and so on. And I can't remember his name. I can picture his face, but I cannot remember his name. He's a great guy. One of the petty officer radar plotters was walking past, and he noticed the screen, and he noticed that it looked kind of like what he was sitting looking at all day when he was on duty in the ops room. So he came in, he says, "What's this?" I said, "Oh, this is a computer game, it's called Harpoon." So I paused it and said, "Look," because I was doing a British surface action group, and we started looking at the details of the various different Type 22 frigates and Type 42 destroyers and so on and so on. And because he was, a radar operator, he said, "I'll pull up the radar details." And oh yeah, that's the radar systems that we have. Can you have a look at the 909 radar, which is, I don't know if you've ever seen Type 42 destroyer. They've got a big radome at the front and one at the back. Each one of those, basically, it's the targeting radar for the Sea Dart missile on the front. So I pulled up the radar data, and he said, "Holy shit, that's classified, and it's accurate." So we have no idea where 360 Pacific actually gets the information from. Because this was in the 90s. But if Russia ever wanted to know anything about British, American, French, Italian, whatever, radar and sensor information, all they had to do was get a copy of 360 Pacific's game Harpoon, because it was astonishingly accurate data. Right, moving on from Catster. Morning, Jingles. Hope you've had and are still having a good weekend. Do you think that when Project CW... so this is Wargaming's new tank game, eventually comes to a full release, you'll feature some replays from it, since there is unlimited ammo and respawns. Right now it's not uncommon to see people do an absurd amount of damage and not being destroyed for the whole match, just like in Rampage mode for World of Tanks a while ago. I think it can make for some fantastic replays to feature, even if it's just occasionally, like the annual War Thunder video. Oh, you've reminded me, I must talk about War Thunder. Yeah. I mean, I had a go. I've still got it installed, and they've extended the open beta, so you can still play it. Is it an open beta or a closed beta? Whatever. It's still available for preview play. And I didn't notice whether or not they actually had a replay system. I can't. I imagine they probably would because it just makes sense. I mean, they've got the technology, and it's one of those systems that's just great for popularizing the game and spreading awareness of it on YouTube, for example, because you don't need to be doing live recordings. You can just run the replay and then edit at your leisure. So yeah, hopefully they do have a replay system. I can't imagine why they wouldn't. And yeah, I mean, it just looks like a fun game. World of Tanks has always been a bit sweaty, if you know what I mean. I mean, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. The competitive nature, like trying to get the most kills, do the most damage, so on and so on. It tends to make, I mean, you know how toxic a World of Tanks game can be, which by no means as toxic as something like League of Legends, but it can be pretty bad. That's why they introduced the feature like the randomizer, where you can have a fake name displayed to everybody when you're in battle, and then not be subject to abuse after the battle by private message. I've almost forgotten where I'm going here. Oh no, don't get old, kids. You start conversations, you start sentences, and you know where you are at the beginning, and then you forget where you are at the end. What was he talking about? Feature some... Yeah, I will certainly feature some replays from it, because it does seem like, oh, that was it, the whole sweaty nature of World of Tanks, and the somewhat less, although it's got the potential to become just as sweaty as World of Tanks, but the less sweaty nature of Project CW, because it's not like when you're World of Tanks and you just make a bad move at the start, you get unlucky, and that's it, you're dead, you're out of the match. You got respawns. It's a sort of even more arcadey version of World of Tanks. The vibe I got from it when I was playing was kind of like World of Tanks or Armored Warfare crossed with Overwatch, because the tank and the tank commander are kind of like your hero, and you can kind of upgrade them. It just looks like an interesting take on the whole World of Tanks concept. Oh, hang on a second, I'm going to have to edit this out. I need to cough. Right, okay. Live broadcast, isn't it great? Yeah, I'll probably do some replays from it. However, he says even if it's just occasional, like the annual War Thunder video. So, War Thunder. It's been a while since I did a War Thunder video, and there's a good reason for that. And it's not because I don't want to do War Thunder videos. I talked months ago about how I noticed that my War Thunder account had been compromised. Somebody had been logging in from Singapore and playing my account. And when I got in there and noticed that my name had been changed, and I mean, the account was still mostly intact. I don't know what they were doing on it other than playing. I'm not entirely sure why. I basically had to activate the security measures and shut the account down. In the process of trying to get the account reactivated, because the issue was, this was kind of weird actually, the issue was that when I set that account up, I had my old email address. 2 years ago, when I moved into this place, I got a new email address, but the War Thunder account was still associated with the old address. And this is where things get a bit weird, because even though the account was associated with my old personal email, when I shut the account down, the notification that the account had been shut down got sent to my new email address, which is really strange. But going through the whole reactivating the account process proved to be impossible, because despite the fact that the notification had been sent to my new email address, they wouldn't accept any please reset my account requests coming from anything other than my old email address, which I no longer have access to. Now, a Gaijin employee heard this in an episode of Mingles.business 2 or 3 months ago when I first brought the issue up. Oh, the other bizarre thing was I can still log into... Apparently I have a Steam War Thunder account, and I can log in via Steam, but it's a different account with different tanks and aircraft on it. It's just really strange. But in order to actually watch a replay, I need a valid... So we'll come back to the issue of the Steam account separately, because this is also just hilarious in a, my God, Gaijin, how the hell do you manage to screw that up kind of way. So this guy said, I can help you get your account unlocked. Oh, that's very generous. What do I need to do? He says, just go to this web page and do this customer service request and we'll make sure it's expedited for you. Well, that was 3 months ago. They never replied to it. So good job, Gaijin. But hey, if all I want to do is watch War Thunder replays, I can still access the game through my Steam account. Hooray. Here's the problem, though. If you want to run a War Thunder replay, you need to go... You have the game running, you go to the War Thunder replay site, you click the link for the replay that you want to watch on the site, and it opens up the battle in your running version of the client. So it didn't matter that my Steam client version of War Thunder was a bit, what the hell's this? I don't remember having all of these tanks and planes and so on and so on. Because I'm not playing it, I'm just using it to run a replay. But you can't run a replay from the Gaijin War Thunder replay site unless you log in. And I don't have access to the email address that uses that login anymore. So I can't even watch a War Thunder replay, even though I do have a working version of War Thunder. And they're not, 3 months since I made the request to get the account back up and running, and they never even bothered responding. So, yeah. Yeah, don't expect there to be an annual War Thunder video this year. Next question. How are we doing for time? Oh, not too bad. From Radogian. Jingles, World of Warships matchmaking. Oh dear. Has seen fit to banish me to the noob dimension populated entirely by morons who press W and go in straight lines. My question is, what would you do if all the pubs were removed from England? Well, that's a bit of a segue, isn't it? Where would you go to chat about soccer? Yes, it's called soccer. No, it isn't. You Britbongs invented the word. Well, yeah, true. Would you drink tea instead? If so, which kind? I like iced tea, but then again, I'm from across the pond. Cheers. I can't remember the last time I was in a pub, actually. Yeah. I mean, actually, I can remember the last time I was in a pub. It was about 2 years ago, right after I'd moved into this place. And I had to go to the post office to collect some mail that had been delivered there. And on the way back, because there's a pub right outside my front door, so I stopped in there. And it was a nice little place. I had a sort of citrusy lager. But that was the last time I was actually in a pub. Because the thing is, unless you're like really kind of sad and strange, you don't go into pubs alone and just sit there in the corner quietly drinking by yourself. And the only friend I had who actually lived locally was Eddie, and he died last year. So all of my other friends are basically online. So there's no real reason for me to go into a pub. Occasionally I might go out and have a meal on a weekend with Rita, and then we'll have a drink in the restaurant, but we never really go to pubs. So if all of the pubs in the UK closed down, providing I could survive the revolution that would cause, I would probably actually be okay, because I never really go to pubs anyway, and I have no interest in football. So yeah, I'm not really into sports at all. Big surprise, I know. Yeah, gaming nerd, not into sports. Although, funnily enough, I was never really into team sports. But any kind of sport that involved putting a weapon in my hand, I was actually pretty good at. Archery, fencing, shooting. I've already bored you all to death about the story of how when I was down the Falklands for the first time, the Royal Engineer Corporal, who ran the fencing club down there, because they've got a strong tradition of fencing, and the Royal Engineers coached me to specifically, not to be a good fencer, but to specifically be able to beat the Royal Air Force Corporal, who was the Air Force champion, and these two guys hated each other. So he specifically coached me to beat this guy in the fencing tournament that he organised. Didn't make me a good fencer, it just made me good at beating this one person, which I did, which was hilarious. However, when it comes to shooting, there's a story I don't think I've told in a while. Years back, again, when I was in the Navy, the Portsmouth Command Skillet Arms Shoot was held at, I can't remember the name of the firing range, but in Portsmouth. And I went to represent the ship because I'm a pretty good shot. So there were two different disciplines, rifle and pistol. And most people in the Navy never get their hands on a pistol. When I first joined, you see, the thing about the Navy is that you have small arms. There's a small arms store. You need weapons for boarding party and the duty watch security team and so on and so on. When I first joined up, it was Sterling submachine guns. That's what we had: Sterling submachine guns and SLRs, known to the rest of the world. Self-loading rifles, British SLRs. They were basically a semi-automatic only version of the FN FAL. Great weapon. And then when the SA-80 was introduced, eventually we started replacing them all with SA-80s. And the standard sidearm, which almost nobody on board ever needed to, like for example, the boarding officer would be issued a sidearm, and the boarding team radio operator, funnily enough, me, was also issued a sidearm, because you've got this Klansman radio on your back. You don't want to be carting around a big rifle and all that crap as well. So I'd be issued a sidearm. The sidearm was a Browning high power, which is essentially almost, but also not quite, a sort of 9mm version of the Colt 1911, sort of. Both developed by John Browning, legendary weapon designer. But anyway, the Browning high power, very, very, very nice pistol. The thing you have to remember, though, is that even though the Navy did have all of these small arms, we were not first in line to get them. So all the stuff that we had was the stuff that the Army didn't want anymore. What that means is they were worn to shit. Now, that wasn't such an issue with the SA-80s because they were relatively new rifles anyway, and we got the excess stock that the Army didn't want. But we were still using the Browning high powers that we've been using since the 1950s. Or rather, that the Army had been using since the 1950s. And when they were worn to shit and basically unusable, they said, all right, Navy, you can have these. So I'm there at the Skillet Arms shoot. And we'd just done the rifle section. I did pretty well. I didn't think I won anything, but I did pretty well. And then we're on the 20-metre range, doing the 9mm pistol shoot with these Browning high powers. And each ship had to provide their own weapons. So you'd get all your stuff out of the armory and you'd bring it along. And those were the weapons that you would compete with. So I'm there and as one of the few people on board the ship who was actually trained to use a 9mm pistol, I'm there on the 20-metre range. Now, the rules of the shoot are that if you have any malfunctions, you have to clear them yourself and get on with it. Right? You don't get, okay, pause the shoot, let this guy fix his weapon, and then carry on. Right? You deal with the malfunctions and you carry on shooting. So I'm there. 9mm pistol, Browning high power, 20-metre range, targets up, shoot, bang, pistol's jammed. Have a look at the ejection port. It hasn't extracted the spent casing properly, so rack the slide, eject it, let the slide go forward, carry on firing. I'm already at a disadvantage because it's a timed shoot. Bang, weapon jams again. Have a look at the ejection port, exactly the same thing. Work the casing loose, let the slide go forward, rechamber a new round, in battery, bang. Another malfunction. Have a look at exactly the same thing, only this time the thing won't come loose, it's wedged in there, good and proper. So, drop the magazine, pull the slide back, get my finger in there, get it out. I've probably got about 5 seconds left, I've only fired 3 shots. Reinsert the magazine, let the slide go forward, the base plate on the magazine falls off, followed by the magazine spring, followed by all of my bullets, at which point I just fucking give up. Because that was the quality of the weapons that we actually had in the Navy. And remember, I'd been doing boarding party, going on board ships and boarding them and inspecting them for contraband and all that sort of shit, with one of these weapons, right? And it's a personal weapon, a 9mm pistol, right? It's there for self-defense. God help me if anything had ever happened and I needed to rely on one of these things. Anyway, next question. Oh, okay. Super Snail. Greetings from Australia, Jingles. G'day, Super Snail. My question is, have you heard of Sabaton? And if so, what's your favourite song from them? I have heard of Sabaton, to my great shame. I really like them, but I don't own any of their records. But I do like their music. I would probably say, I could hum it for you. I can't remember what the song's called, but it's just this really thumping good tune. I'll have to look it up and maybe stick this in as a comment. But I've actually met them. So you're probably aware they did some collaborations with World of Tanks, and then later World of Warships, and it was at Gamescom a couple of years ago, and they were putting on a show in the Wargaming stand, and I don't think I was there doing anything official, but because Wargaming all knew me, they said, if you need to go somewhere to sit down and have a quiet drink and something to eat without being bothered by the crowds, you can use our backstage area. which was technically not backstage, but was in this sort of car park outside that was there for wargaming. All of their stuff was there. And they had a sort of catering section there. So, oh, fantastic, thanks very much. So I'm out there at lunchtime, helping myself to free food and drink. And I can't remember his name, but their guitarist was sitting there. And, there was nobody else. So we sat down with him. What a really, really nice guy. Just, there was none of this rock and roll shit about him. He was just a genuinely nice guy. Had a really good chat. Didn't talk about music or games or anything. We just shot the shit about whatever. Really nice bloke. So yeah, I have heard of Sabaton. They are a fantastic bunch of guys. And I cannot remember. I've got this song going through my head. I don't want to embarrass myself by humming it or attempting to sing it, but it is such a memorable tune. As a lot of their stuff is, they're just really good, solid, memorable rock tunes. Sadly, however, I don't have a single one of their albums. Really sorry about that. Let's see, what's this next question? Oh, yeah, this is a good one. This is from Dusty. We're probably going to have to make this the last one because we're coming up to 45 minutes in. He says, hey, Jingles, got a question for you based on something I did about 2 months ago, where I managed to cut my damned artery open in my leg. Whoa! While whittling a Christmas present. Holy shit. Yeah, the femoral artery, you bleed out in minutes if you cut that thing. He says he had to tie a tourniquet and not bleed out. Yeah, that was a narrow escape, Dusty. Based on my idiocy, what's the dumbest injury you've managed to inflict on yourself? I don't know if this can actually beat your stupidity, but when I was probably 12 years old, so when I was 12, back in 1982, we emigrated to South Africa. My stepfather was a fitter and turner, and he worked at the Eveready battery factory in Newcastle. But the thing is, he was a union shop steward, and this was in the days when the Conservative government were really clamping down on trade unions, and so they were. Long story short, he basically got himself blacklisted because he was a union activist and spent 2 years unemployed, couldn't get a job anywhere. So he took a job in South Africa working for the South African Iron and Steel Corporation. We all emigrated to South Africa in 1982. And I was at high school in South Africa, and I can't think what you would call these things. Call them a grandstand, I suppose. But it's basically an iron frame with a bunch of benches on it, staggered in a row, higher up towards the back. You can picture what I'm talking about. It's a big sports seating arrangement. And they needed to move it. And bearing in mind, we're talking, like 12 years old. So we're doing sports, and this thing had to be moved just a couple of yards from one end of whichever sports field we were on to the other. No more than 15 or 20 yards. So they got all of the kids all around this thing, and this thing was made of iron, right? It wasn't light, and all of the kids had to pick this thing up and then move it to wherever it was it needed to be moved. So we did this, 12 years old, and the thing about South Africa is, I don't know if it's still the case today, but basically when you did sports, you did it barefoot. Not because people couldn't afford running shoes or trainers, as we call them in the UK, or tackies, as they call them in South Africa, but it's just that was the thing. The soles of everybody's feet were like leather from running around barefoot everywhere. I, however, hadn't grown up like that, so I'm barefoot. Not that it would have made any difference when you hear what happened. And my delicate pink feet, they haven't had time to harden up yet because I've only been there 6 months. And we put this thing down on my foot, and it took the end of my big toe off. So that was fun. Also extremely painful. And that's probably, although technically I didn't do it to myself, there were about 30 other people involved, so we could spread the blame around. But yeah, took the end of my big toe off. So one of my big toes is shorter than the other one to this day because they dropped a sports grandstand on it when I was 12. And on that bombshell, I think we're going to call it there. My apologies to everybody whose questions didn't get answered, but I think we managed to hammer through a good few there. Yeah, we're doing pretty well. And I hope you've enjoyed the answers to the questions. And there was one that I did promise to come back to. It was one of the early ones. So let me just find it. Oh, there we go, from Bearcat Racing. So, reminder, in case you've forgotten, let's hear your suggestions here, and I'll also have a good think about it. In the year 6057, I've emerged from my hiding spot behind the seventh planet in the solar system, time has come to reign over Earth. You have to introduce a new religion with me as leader. What 2 rules will you introduce? And what megalithic monument will you leave Earth to honour you? And where would you like it erected? Erected. So you all have a good think about that. And I will see you again, same time, same place, next month for March's annual Q&A here on the Salt Mines Discord server. And if you're watching this as Monday's episode of Mingles with Jingles, hope you enjoyed the video. And as always, take care. And I'll catch you next time.